I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. I'm going to apologise for two things. One, my voice and my overall general tiredness, because I am filming this the day after the Books Insight Melbourne book event and I'm really tired and kind of wrecked. Had the best time. The vlog's coming out in a couple of days, so if you remember you can already see it, but if you are not a member it should be out on Tuesday. Also, Melbourne is doing its best version of interpretive dance for weather. So at the moment, it's currently very, very bright. The sun may go behind the clouds and have been arguing with my camera for the last little while. So I figured brighter is better than too dark and not being able to see me. So we're just gonna leave this and hope that the weather decides to behave for the next hour. But it is Melbourne, so that's unlikely. This is my reading week from the 1st until the 10th of October. I read a total of 3,059 pages and my yearly reading total is 477 books. It was also the first week I went back to work, so this feels like a really long week, and I was looking back at my list and going, did I really read that at the start of this week? And apparently I did, so we're gonna go with it. So the first book that I read was Play Dirty by Onley James and Neve Wilder. This is the second book in the Wages of Sin series. This is an romantic suspense story between two mercenary/assassins who are in competition with one another. They had a one-night stand and then one of them discovers that the other is their opponent, and ever since then they hook up and then steal jobs from each other. They have very different skill sets and very different styles in terms of their job. One is a chemist and uses poison a lot. The other is very proficient with guns and kills his targets from a distance, but they just can't help but be in each other's orbit constantly. I really like this one just for something fun and easy to read, and something that was a little bit dark but also had a bit of adventure and a bit of thrill to it in terms of lots of things happening in the background. The two end up working together to take out a target, and they have to confront their feelings for each other, which they were, ignoring. And one of the funniest things in the entire book was a little bit towards the end, where they know that their target is seeing a psychologist who mostly counsels people with psychopathic or sociopathic tendencies. And so in order to get a session with him, because they want to use him as an in to get to their target, they pretend to be a married psychopath couple. And so they have couples counseling. And anytime counseling is in a book, I am always thrilled because counseling is important. But also, it was hilarious because these two are still at a point where they can't confront their feelings, and the psychologist is like, yeah, you two have a bit of work to do. So it was just a bit of fun, and I've been meaning to come back to this series because I think I DNF'd the first book, but I knew that I wanted to continue with the series because this one sounded really intriguing. Then I also picked up Hard Job by Annabeth Albert. This is the second book in the A-List Security series. This is another romantic suspense book and series. The third book just came out this week, and I wanted to make sure that I had read this one before I go and pick that one up. This is a rock star / bodyguard / brother's best friend romance. Ezra is a rock star who is going on the road, but he has a habit of going a little bit rogue, and so his record label want him to have security, but Ezra doesn't want to give them control over who is literally following him around everywhere. And so he talks to his best friend, whose older stepbrother happens to work for A-List Security. So Duncan is an ex-SEAL, and the company has been set up to help vets who are getting out of the service have a job and have a purpose. And Duncan is very reluctant because he has known Ezra since Ezra was a young teen. This is an age gap as well. As they go on the road and they spend time together, they have to really sort out a lot of confusing feelings between each other. But what I did like is they do actually talk about it, and we deal a lot with the complications of what being a celebrity and being in the limelight is like for Ezra, and the reality of having fans who want a piece of you all the time. So I found it really interesting. I do actually like rockstar romances, I just don't read enough of them. So stay tuned, there'll probably be a few more. I also read Greed by Lana Peherchek. This is the second book in the Deadly Seven series. This is that paranormal superhero sci-fi romance series that I started last week and I'm absolutely loving. This second book is very much like a Superman Lois retelling because you have Griffin, whose moniker is Greed, and he is always in control and he is very obsessed with keeping the balance between his deadly sin of greed and what is going on in the world around him. And his family send him undercover into a media agency where he meets Lilo, who is an investigative journalist who doesn't believe all the negative press that the Deadly Seven are getting, but she's constantly being thwarted by her nemesis reporter person at her work. And Griffin and Lilo end up working on a case where they're investigating the deaths of some people in the town, but it also ties back to the Deadly Seven, and she is determined to prove that they are not responsible for it. Again, I'm really enjoying this series. I love superheroes. I love this concept, and the world is fun and gritty. It feels very much like a comic book, but in a novel form, and I definitely appreciate that. I did actually order myself a set of the series, because if you ordered the whole set, you got a discount, and I really like the covers for them, so the next lot I should be reading in physical form, so I'm very excited about that. I also read a novella by J.A. Collard called Summer Storm. J.A. Collard is one of the organisers of the Books Inside Melbourne event that I went to. This is a super short insta-love novella about two people who meet on a plane. They do not get along while they're on the plane, but the heroine is a single mum whose partner, I think, died in a car accident. Anyway, he passed away really suddenly, and since then she has just been raising her daughter and she hasn't really had a break. And so her mum sends her on a holiday just to get away. While she's on holiday, she obviously meets this guy and he is just very abrupt with her. But they end up caught together in a storm and having to wait it out, so there's that forced proximity element. I will say there are content warnings in here for attempted sexual assault, so just be aware of that. But it's super short. I think it's only like 80 pages. I also read The Rose Volume 2 by PD Alleva. This is a sci-fi horror story that I read the first book for ages ago because the author sent me review copies of both of them, so I finally got back to this one. I have to say I probably am not in the mood for this kind of book at the moment because it's definitely an intriguing concept. It is a very cool take on vampires. It's very dark, it's very gritty, it's very action-packed. There is a sci-fi alien element in here as well. The thing I struggled with, and this could just be my brain at the moment, is the fact that there are so many characters and we're constantly switching point of views. I had trouble keeping track of where we were going. But that said, if you like action, like this thing is non-stop. It is also very long, so just be aware of that. But the chapters are quite short, so you do get through things really quickly. But like I said, my brain is just not in the headspace for a lot of characters at the moment. I also had another review copy, Come Hunting by Eleanor Ireland, and she is an Australian author as well. This is a new adult paranormal horror story with some romance thrown into it as well. So this is a story about Trin and her friends who believe that in the past they accidentally summoned something when they performed a ritual in a cemetery. So they performed this ceremony, their loved ones disappeared quite suddenly, and then these horrors / ghouls started appearing. And so they've taken it on themselves to fight the ghouls. But at the start of the story, Trin is separate from her group. She decided to leave and the others feel like she has abandoned them. But then she is attacked in a place where she was not expecting to be attacked by one of these horrors, and so she's drawn back into her circle of friends. They have a new member, Arthur, who she has a bit of an antagonistic relationship with initially, and then they begin to explore a relationship together. This was a really interesting concept. I have not read anything quite like this. It does leave off on a cliffhanger, so be aware of that if you do go into it, but I would probably be very interested in continuing the series to see where it goes. Then I read The Gamble by Kristin Ashley. I was buddy reading this with Brie and Megan, and Heather was putting in her 2 cents worth as well while we were reading it. So this is a ginormous book, but most of Kristin Ashley's books are, and it is a contemporary romance. It is about a woman called Nina who lives in the UK, but I think she was born in the US, and she is currently engaged to a guy, but she needs a time out from it because she thinks something's missing. She thinks this is not quite right, and she's not quite sure if she's going to go through with the wedding. So she packs up her things and heads back to the US for 2 weeks, and she's planning on staying in this beautiful cabin in a small town and just to get away from everything and to sort through her thoughts. When she gets there, it's snowing, she's not feeling great, and when she gets to the cabin, the owner of the cabin is there and tells her there's been a mix-up and she can't stay. She ends up leaving, she ends up in a ditch, and she is rescued from her car by the guy from the cabin, and as it turns out, she has the flu and she is horribly sick for 2 days. He nurses her back to health, then he decides to let her stay. There are a lot of things that I loved about this book. I love that the heroine is an absolute firecracker of a character when she is not afraid to argue with the hero and give as good as she gets. He is a very alpha hero, so if you don't like alpha heroes in contemporary stories, this may not be for you because he does like telling her what to do in all aspects. Most of the time she pushes back and goes, know, but just be aware of that in the story. One thing we did talk about in the group chat, there is a little bit of repetition in terms of we get the same information quite a bit in the story. It didn't bother me so much because I'm quite used to that in Kristin Ashley's writing style, so I just sort of read it and moved on. But if you are someone who doesn't like that, again, this may not be for you. It does deal very heavily with suicide, so there is the mention of a character very close to Nina who committed suicide historically off page, but there is also an attempted suicide on page from another side character, and it does form a big part of the story. So if you're at all sensitive to that, be aware of it. It does have something to do with sexual assault, and the character is relatively young. So obviously because Nina has, come over here from the UK to get away from her fiance, she ends up breaking off the relationship with the fiance within a few days. So if anyone's worried about that. However, he doesn't quite believe her. Her family is quite split. Her mother lives in the US and is a total firecracker like her. Her dad is incredibly controlling and not in a good way. Her fiance is just oblivious as to why someone would break up with him. So, you have all of those dynamics thrown in here as well as her coming to terms with being in a small town where everyone knows everyone's business, and where Max, the guy she ends up in a relationship with, has a past and has a history and is dealing with that because he was previously married and his wife died in a car crash. So there's a lot of things in here. You get put through the ringer in this book constantly. It is incredibly slow burn, but I did enjoy it because I love those small town books where you get to know all of the characters who live there. So while I don't think this is for everyone, I definitely enjoyed it. And then I read Reverie and Redemption by Kaydence Snow. And this is a book I received in a subscription box on Thursday and then read the book on Friday because I was so excited. And also Kaydence Snow was at the signing that I went to. You can tell from my tabs that I did enjoy this. This is a paranormal why choose romance story that features dreamwalkers. I also talk about this in my reading vlog for the event, so you can hear more about it there as well. But Reverie lives in a small town and she is kind of the town pariah because when she was younger she started sleepwalking, and every time she would wake up from a massive sleepwalking episode, someone close to her would be asleep and couldn't wake up. A couple of people died from this, and some ended up in sort of sleep comas for a couple of years and then woke up, and some are still in comas, and there's sort of no rhyme or reason as to why this is happening. We open the book and she's just woken up from a sleepwalking episode. She has no idea where she is. She's in the middle of the forest. She's far from home, and all she's in is her night clothes and socks. And the only reason she wakes up is because she hears this voice shouting at her to wake up. And so she wakes up, she walks her way back into town, and everyone thinks she's strange because she's literally, she hates having to walk back through town dressed as she is, but she does it, and she does it with her head held high, and she sort of just keeps to herself. But eventually she keeps hearing these voices, and there are 3 distinct male voices that she hears, and she hears only snippets of their conversations, and they're talking about her until they realize that she can hear them, and then they start talking to her. And at first these 3 men think that she has something to do with the people falling asleep, but then they quickly begin to realize that it's not her, but it is somehow tied to her, and that she has the ability to see and talk to them in the real world as well as in the dreamscape, and they teach her how to control her dreams and how to lucid dream so they can actually have conversations and they can try and figure out what's going on together. I did love that all of the 3 male characters, so you have Hollis and Sinan and Oscar, they all have very distinct personalities. You never get confused about which one is which. They are all very intrigued by her. It is a very steamy book. It was just fun and immersive, and this is a perfect October read. It just had that atmosphere. And you guys know I like things like The Mistwalker and The Nightmare and Sing Me to Sleep, which all deal with dreams. And this was in the similar vein, and I really liked that. Plus, this is a special edition cover for it, so it has the gold foiling. It's really pretty. I will put a picture of the original cover on the screen as well. But I'm so glad that I read it, and talking to Kaydence was really, really lovely. Also, this is a standalone. It is a standalone Why Choose Paranormal Romance. I mean, how often do you get that? Highly recommend. This was great. So those are the books that I read this week. In the comments, I'd love to know if you have read any of them or if you're planning on picking any of them up, or feel free to share something that you have read and loved during the week as well. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a sleeping emoji down below because I'm tired. I read a book about dreams and I just feel like that's relevant at this point in time. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.